This is America Weekend. I'm Mike Bennett. Naturalist and farmer Greg Quinn is a regular contributor here. He's responsible for bringing black currants back to the U.S. market and grows black currants on his farm in the Hudson Valley, New York.
I'm Greg Quinn with this week's Notes from the Currant Farm. I think the bulk of heat and humidity of summer is behind us here on the farm, which means we're coming to the end of the dog days of summer. The expression, dog days of summer, associated with the oppressively hot period in July and August in the northern hemisphere, was actually used as far back as 330 BC, when Aristotle discussed this time of year in his famous 8-book work called The Lectures on Nature. You see, in the middle of summer, the brightest star in the constellation Sirius, Canis Major, meaning large dog, used to rise at about the same time as the sun in the morning. It was thought that this bright star, combined with the sun, increased the amount of heat from the heavens, hence the dog days. Interestingly, while this celestial pairing was true in the days of ancient Greece and Rome, it no longer occurs because the movement of heavenly bodies in relationship to one another constantly change. In ancient times, it was reported that this period was an evil time, during which seas boiled, wine soured, animals became sluggish, and people became irritable and grouchy. I don't know about the seas boiling and wine going bad, but irritable people and sleeping dogs sure rings a bell when it's hot and humid. On the other hand, there are wonderful things about this time of year, and maybe the best of all is the tomato. Red and yellow globes of juicy decadence which say summer more than any other food. Maybe if Aristotle had some tomatoes in his garden, he wouldn't have been so grumpy about summer. The tomato is arguably the most common vegetable in the world. More about that vegetable thing in a bit. Its use as a food dates back to about 500 BC in South America, most likely in the area of Peru. The word tomato comes from the Native American Nahuatl language, tomato, meaning swelling fruit. When the Spanish started colonizing the Americas, they, like most people, fell in love with this delicacy, which was probably small and yellow at the time. They began bringing plants wherever their travels led them. If you saw a Spanish ship in a harbor, you could pretty much be assured of finding tomatoes there. There's some debate as to whether Cortez was the first to bring them back to Europe in the 1520s, or Columbus collected them 30 years earlier. But the first mention of them in Europe was in a small botanical book written in 1544 by an Italian botanist, Pietro Andrea Mattioli, who named it Pomo d'Oro, meaning apple of gold. The Italians to this day call tomatoes pomodoro. There are over 7,000 varieties of tomatoes today, and whether grown in the garden, on the patio, in a greenhouse, or even hanging upside down, more tomatoes are grown in the U.S. than any other vegetable. Or are they a fruit? Okay, so botanically, tomatoes are considered fruit, but that's not the end of the story. You see, by definition, a fruit is the part of a flowering plant that develops into a seed-bearing ovule. At least that's what a botanist would tell you. But cucumbers, squash, pumpkins, peas, beans, and eggplant all fall into this category. So how come they're vegetables and not fruit? This confusion was actually made even more so by none other than the U.S. Supreme Court. More on that crazy story next week. For a podcast of this and previous notes from the Currant Farm, and for America's #1 source of black and red currant products, go to currants.com. That's currants with an A.
And with naturalist and farmer Greg Quinn, I'm Mike Bennett. You're listening to America Weekend.